wouldn't turn away as the baying Perytons scattered, as the Lotus hurtled into the forefront of the pack, flinging bodies about. It leaped up at the throat of the iron beast, which reared on 4 hooves and raised the other 4, and with them smashed the Lotus flat into the street. The bloom of fire that followed blotted out that end of the street. Kit responded to Nita's pulling then, and together they ran through the doors, up the ramp that led into Grand Central, out across the floor. Nita was busy getting the Rowan wand out, had gotten ahead of Kit, who couldn't move as fast because he was crying. But it was his hand that shot out and caught her by the collar at the bottom of the ramp, almost choking her, and kept her from falling into the pit. There was no floor. From one side of the main concourse to the other was a great smoking crevasse. The floor and lower levels and tunnels beneath all split as if with an axe. Ozone smell and cinder smell and the smell of tortured steel breathed up hot in their faces, while from behind, outside, the thunder of huge hooves on concrete and the howls of Perytons began again. Below them, severed tunnels and stairways gaped dark. There was no seeing the bottom. It was veiled in fumes and soot, underlit by the blue arcs of shorted-out third rails, and an ominous deep red, as if the earth itself had broken open and was bleeding lava. The hooves clanged closer. Nita turned to Kit, desperate. Though his face still streamed with tears, there was an odd, painful calm about it. "I know what to do," he said, his voice saying that he found that strange. He drew the antenna out of his back pocket, and it was just as Nita noticed how strangely clear the air was burning about him that Kit threw the piece of steel out over the smoking abyss. She would have cried out and grabbed him, except that he was watching it so intently. The hoofbeats stopped and were followed by a sound as of iron boots coming down on the sidewalk, immensely heavy, shattering the stone. Despite her own panic, Nita found she couldn't look away from the falling antenna either. She was gripped motionless in the depths of a spell again, while the power that burned the air clear now poured itself through Kit and into his wizardry. There was something wrong with the way the antenna was falling. It seemed to be getting bigger with distance instead of smaller. It stretched, it grew, glittering as it turned and changed. It wasn't even an antenna anymore. Sharp blue light and diffuse red gleamed from flat, polished faces, edges sharp as razors. It was a sword blade, not even falling now, but laid across the chasm like a bridge. The wizardry broke and turned Nita loose. Kit moved away from her and stepped out onto the flat of the blade, fear and pain showing in his face again. "Kit!" "It's solid," he said, still crying, taking another step out onto the span, holding his arms out for balance as it bent slightly under his weight. "Come on, Nita. It's noon-forged steel. He can't cross it. He'll have to change shape or seal this hole up." "Nita, come on," Fred said, and bobbled out across the crevasse, following Kit. Though almost blind with terror, her ears full of the sound of iron-shod feet coming after them, she followed Fred, who was holding a straight course out over the sword blade, followed him, arms out as she might have on a balance beam, most carefully not looking down. This was worse than the bridge of air had been, for that hadn't flexed so terribly under each step she or Kit took. His steps threw her off balance until she halted long enough to take a deep breath and step in time with him. Smoke and the smell of burning floated up around her. The shadows of the dome above the concourse stirred with wicked eyes. The open doors to the train platforms ahead of her muttered, their mouths full of hate. She watched the end of the blade, looked straight ahead. 5 steps. Kit was off. 3. 1. She reached out to him, needing desperately to feel the touch of a human hand. He grabbed her arm and pulled her off the bridge just as another blast of black-red fire blew in the doors on the other side of the abyss. Kit said one sharp word in the speech, and the air went murky around his body again as the book ceased to work through him. Nita let go, glanced over her shoulder in time to see the sword blade snap back to being an antenna, like a rubber band going back to its right size. It fell into the fuming darkness, a lone glitter, quickly gone. They ran. Nita could still see in her mind the place where the World Gate was hidden. The book's power had burned it into her like a brand. She took the lead, racing down a flight of stairs, around a corner, and down another flight, into echoing beige-tiled corridors where Fred and the Rowan wand were their only light. Above them they could hear the thunderous rumor of iron footsteps, slow, leisurely, inexorable, following them down. The howls of Peritons floated down to them like the voices of lost souls, hungry for the blood and pain they needed to feel alive again. "Here!" Nita shouted, not caring what might hear, and dodged around a corner and did what she had never done in all her life before. Jumped a subway turnstile. Its metal fingers made a grab for her, but she was too fast for them, and Kit eluded them too, coming right behind. At full speed, Nita pounded down the platform, looking for the steps at the end of it that would let them down onto the tracks. She took them 3 at a time, 2 leaps, and then was running on cinders again, leaping over ties. Behind her she could hear Kit hobbling as fast as he could on his sore leg, gasping, but keeping up. Fred shot along beside her, pacing her, lighting her way. Eyes flickered in his light. Hide-behinds, dun-mice, ducking under cover as the 3 of them went past. Nita slowed and stopped in the middle of the tracks. "Here!" Kit had his manual out already. He found the page by Fred's light, thumped to a stop beside Nita. "Here? In the middle of the— Read! Read!" she yelled. There was more thunder rolling in the tunnel than just the sound of their pursuers' footsteps. Far away she could hear what had been missing from the other tunnel beneath City Hall. Trains. Away in the darkness, wheels slammed into the tracks they rode. Even now the rails around them were clacking faintly in sympathy, and a slight cool wind breathed against Nita's face. A train was coming. On this track. Kit began the world-gating spell, reading fast. Again the air around them seemed clearer, fresher, as the power of the Book of Night with Moon seized the spell and its speaker, used them both. That was when the Star Snuffer's power came down on them. It seemed impossible that the dank, close darkness in which they stood could become any darker, but it did, as an oppressive blanket of clutching, choking hatred fell over them, blanketing everything. The Rowan rod's silver fire was smothered. Fred's light went out as if he had been stepped on. Kit stopped reading, struggled for breath. Nita tried to resist, tried to find air. Couldn't. Collapsed to her knees, choking. The breeze from the dark at the end of the tunnel got stronger, the onrushing train, pushing the air in front of it right up the track, right at them. "I will not," Fred said, struggling, angry. "I will not go out." His determination was good for a brief flare, like a match being struck. Kit found his voice, managed to get out a couple more words of the spell in Fred's wavering radiance, grew stronger, managed a few more. Nita found that she could breathe again. She clutched the Rowan wand, thinking with all her might of the night Leoset had given it to her, the clear moonlight shining down between the branches. The wand came alive again. Shadows that had edged forward from the walls of the tunnel fled again. Kit read, hurrying. 2/3 done, Nita thought. If he can just finish. Far away down the tunnel there were eyes. They blazed. The headlights of a train, coming down at them in full career. The clack of the rails rose to a rattle, the breeze became a wind, and the roar of the train itself echoed not just in the other tunnels, but in this one. Nita got to her feet, facing those eyes down. She would not look away. Fred floated by her shoulder. She gathered him close, perching him by her ear, feeling his terror of the overwhelming darkness as if it were her own, but having nothing to comfort him with. "Kit," she thought, not daring to say it aloud for fear she should interrupt his concentration. The sound of his words was getting lost in the thunder from above, iron-shod feet, the thunder from below, iron wheels on iron rails. Suddenly Kit's voice was missing from the melange of thunders. Without warning, the World Gate was there, glistening in the light of the Rowan wand and Fred and the train howling down toward them, a great jagged soap bubble, trembling with the pressure of sound and air. Kit wasted no time, but leaped through. Fred zipped into the shimmering surface and was gone. Nita made sure of her grip on the Rowan wand, took a deep breath, and jumped through the World Gate. 100 feet away, 50 feet away, the blazing eyes of the train glared at her as she jumped. Its horn screamed in delight, anticipating the feel of blood beneath its wheels. Sudden thunder rocked the platform behind her, black-red fire more sensed than seen. But the rainbow shimmer of the gate broke across her face first. The train roared through the place where she had been, and she heard the beginnings of a cry of frustrated rage as she cheated death and anger, and fell, and fell, and fell, and came down slam on nothing. Or it seemed that way, until, opening her eyes a little wider, she saw the soot and smog trapped in the hardened air she lay on, the only remnant of her walkway. Kit was already getting up from his knees beside her, looking out from their little island of air across to the Pan Am building. Everything was dark, and Nita started to groan, certain that something had gone wrong, and that the World Gate had simply dumped them back in the Star Snuffers world. But no, her walkway was there. Greatly daring, she looked down and saw far below the bright yellow glow of sodium vapor streetlights, long straight streams of traffic, the white of headlights and red of taillights. City noise, roaring, cacophonous, and alive, floated up to them. "We're back! It worked!" Kit was reading from his wizard's manual as fast as he had read down in the train tunnel. He stopped, and then looked at Nita in panic as she got up. "I can't close the gate!" She gulped. "Then he can follow us through—" In an agony of haste, she fumbled her own book out of her pack, checked the words for the air-hardening spell one more time, and began reading herself. Maybe panic helped, for this time the walkway spread itself out from their feet to the roof of the building, very fast indeed. "Come on," she said, heading out across it as quickly as she dared. "But where will we run to?" she thought. "He'll come behind, hunting. We can't go home. He might follow. And what'll he do to the city?" She reached up to the heliport railing and swung herself over it. Kit followed, with Fred pacing him. "What are we going to do?" he said as they headed across the gravel together. "There's no time to call the senior wizards, wherever they are, or even Tom and Carl. He'll be here shortly. Then we'll have to get away from here and find a place to hole up for a little. Maybe the bright book can help." She paused as Kit spoke to the lock on the roof door, and they ran down the stairs. "Or the manuals might have something now that we need it." "Yeah, right," Kit said as he opened the second door at the bottom of the stairs, and they ran down the corridor where the elevators were. But he didn't sound convinced. "The bark? Sounds good." Nita punched the call button for the elevator, and she and Kit stood there, panting. There was a feeling in the air that all hell was about to break loose, and the sweat was breaking out all over Nita because they were going to have to stop it somehow. "Fred," she said, "did you ever hear anything, out where you were? Any stories of someone getting the better of you-know-who?" Fred's light flickered uncomfortably as he watched Kit frantically consulting his manual. "Oh, yes," he said. I'd imagine that's why he wanted a universe apart to himself,